Hey everybody, Zach here from Brushfire Studios. Let's see here, hang on. Audio might not be being picked up. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's try this again. Zach here from Brushfire Studios. And if this is the first time that you have jumped into one of our streams, then you have a perfect opportunity to jump in on a brand new project. This would be the first stream with Haarken Worldclaimer. The last 4 streams covered Gabriel Angelos. He was the chapter master of the Blood Ravens. So we covered that in 4 streams, pretty much from start to finish, minus pre-shading and base coats. So we're doing the exact same thing here with Haarken, because I think that format worked pretty well last time. So just to catch you up on where we were before this stream started, Haarken was based in black, and then Zenithal primed in white. So you had that white to black transition, black taking up the natural shadows, and white taking up all the highlights. Then what we did is we went over it in just a diluted red spray. So essentially what that would do is allow the white paint to show through in the highlights and the black to create a more natural shadow. Then after that, like I like to do with red armor, is for contrast, is Drakenhoof Nightshade. Just a very, very liberal wash of that. Gives all the shadows a little bit of a blue hue to them, so it helps create a nice contrast in the shadows. And then went back over it again in the red. After that, I tried a relatively new process for me. That was liquid masking. So what we're going to be doing with Haarken is all of his trim, his gold trim, is going to be done in a non-metallic metal. So to sort of expedite things and get the process smooth along, what I did is I took, let's see if I have it here, the Vallejo masking fluid, and ruined a few synthetic brushes, just cheap brushes. But what I did is thick coats on everything that I wanted to remain red. So that way I could use my airbrush and spray the base coats for the non-metallic metal and get a nice, get some nice color transitions and gradients in there. So it worked pretty well. And the one thing that you do have to remember if you're going to use masking fluid for anything is you have to put it on very thick. If you put it on too thin, it's just going to be a pain to come off. The more detailed the piece, it's ideal for it to be a lot thicker in there. That way you have more stuff that's sort of catching all those recessed areas, like all the grates and the cabling, stuff like that. But if you were going to try to do a whole army that way, I'd say it's more trouble than it's worth. Just go the traditional method. One-off models is pretty good. I actually did this with 11 models, so I have 10 raptors that I'm doing the same scheme as this. Sort of a dark red with a very bright yellowy metallic. So essentially what we're going to be doing from here is we've already done the base coats. Today I'm just going to be working on those yellow non-metallic metals. See, I'm trying to hold it up here so that you can see the transitions. But as the shoulder, for example, very dark, very muted where the sun isn't catching, and then you're coming up into more brilliant yellows and highlights here. So all we're going to be doing for this is building off the contrast that we already did with the airbrush. So to do that, we'll be using model color golden yellow, scale 75 soul yellow, and dead white. So that's going to be bringing us up. To bring us down, we have dryad bark, and we also have game color black. So I went ahead and I shook all those paints before starting the stream, as I usually forget, and then you can hear me shaking bottles off camera. So I have my wet palette off here to the side, just takes up too much space on the camera, so I keep it off to the side. Maybe down the line we'll get I'll get a second camera going, just one for the paint palette, but for now I think we're pretty good. So I'm going to attack these shoulders first. You might even be able to just faintly hear my kid upstairs. It's bedtime. Mom's working on it. So because I went ahead and appreciated all this yellow, it makes it a lot easier just to focus on the highlights and lowlights as opposed to the transitions all the way across the whole shoulder pad. You know, I already know where I want to be placing my highlights. There's a fair amount of bone detailing, we'll say, on this model. Lots of tiny little skulls in the shoulder pads and on the chest piece and stuff like that. I went ahead and used the game color khaki. I use that as my base color for pretty much everything bone related. And follow that up with an Agrax Earthshade wash. And then just relayer, spot highlight, texture, and to be honest with you, it always comes out fantastic. We did a bunch of that on the last model. And here, I decided I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the Chaos Sigil on his shoulder. Although, you know, it almost might even be a mistake to do this first, because I am going to have to go ahead and do some shading in on all those skulls. We'll see, you know. I'll fix it after if it ends up screwing everything up. But for now, while I'm here, what the hell? All right. So now also, because I've gone ahead and done a whole highlighted area in this golden yellow color here, light doesn't just stick flat on a surface, right? It's going to pour over it. So if light is catching on this big area here, what's going to happen is it's going to follow the edges all the way down the shoulder, right? So we are going to have to do edge highlighting for this non-metallic metal. Now it doesn't have to be ridiculous, just believable. Now a part that's black might not get a brilliant white highlight. No big deal. But we are going to be going up in highlight colors. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll do this this whole shoulder start to finish. Give you a little example of what we're going to be looking at for the rest of the pieces. Doesn't hurt to get a little bit down in the back. Okay. Let's get there. Just the corners in the front. Okay, we're going to move up. I'm going to use this soul yellow here. This is definitely a more brilliant yellow. You know, I pre-shook everything before this, and yet I'm still finding myself shaking droppers. Force of habit, I guess. Okay. Okay. Now, we're doing everything we did with the gold and yellow. We're just sort of doing it on a smaller scale. We're stepping back everything that we're doing. So we are putting this soul yellow closest to the brightest highlight, but we're not going as deep with it as we were doing with the golden yellow. Another reason I did everything with the airbrush beforehand is that once you get to this point, you know, focusing on highlights and such, everything goes pretty quick. You know, like I said in the first set of videos that we did, is I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me base coat things unless it's super important. Okay. So now with this super bright white, what is it, dead white, all I'm going to do here is just some light streaking through the brightest highlighted area. Just a little bit of streaking, and then this dead white is just going to hang out on the very corners, the most extreme edges. Okay. Now, get a couple of these arrowheads at the top. See, these really small pieces, definitely hard to get this effect on. There's just less area to build contrast with, you know, because everything's so thin. But we'll get there. I think this is all going to come together once those bones are done. The khaki is very close to the yellow. It's kind of a reason why I didn't do more browns in this non-metallic metal, is because of the bone pieces. I have a feeling that if there was too many skulls and things like that, and I was doing a brownish non-metallic metal base, I think that it would it just wouldn't work together very well. I think it would take away from the effect. Okay. Just a little bit more white. Okay. Let's see if I can get this focused enough. Let's see. Nope. That might be as good as we can get for now. There we go. There, so on the shoulder here, right up here, you can see the brightest highlights. Let's try to get this out of the light. Brightest highlights are up here, right? That's where the light's going to be catching. Everything sort of pools off, and you have your highlights following the edges. White is the most brilliant highlight, just in streaks along here to break up the sol yellow, and then white just on the very corners. We haven't worried too much about where the highlights are falling on the back of the shoulder. We did a little bit down at the bottom, just because it's not a zero light area, just super low light. And we're going to carry through that technique for the rest of the model. So this other shoulder should look pretty sharp once it's all done up as well. So I'm going to get a move on that now. There we go, that should work. And just like last time, for the majority of the project, I was using Artis Opus size 0 and a size 1. For the last project, I didn't feel the need to go any lower than that. Okay. So now kind of in the same area on this opposite shoulder, I'm going to go back to the golden yellow. Like I said, I have most of my highlights already mapped out because I did that with the airbrush. Anybody who dumps on using an airbrush, you don't know what you're missing. It is a huge time saver. If you're using it correctly, there's nothing you can do with an airbrush that you can't do with a hand brush. In fact, I would argue that hand brushing is better in most cases. However, the efficiency of an airbrush can't be disputed. Alright. Let's get these yellow edges. I want a defined edge for this. But it is very important that if you're doing this technique and you are edge highlighting things, to do a gradient edge highlight as well that is offset from your initial gradient but in the same colors. It's a very wordy way of saying if you're going to do a gradient highlight also. See, and if I have a nice tip with a brush, I definitely prefer to have a bigger bunch of bristles on it. I like a bigger brush because it does hold more paint. Not to say that there isn't uses for smaller tip brushes that hold less paint. Sometimes that can be to your advantage when you really want to make sure that you control how much paint is being transferred. Okay, almost there. So when I'm going at what I call an easy edge here, easy in the sense that it is easy to highlight, go at it at a 45-degree angle, or as close to it as you can. Just helps your bristles catch the best. There we go. Okay. Now, there's some rivets down here in the back that I know aren't going to be needed to be highlighted beyond this golden yellow. So go ahead and take care of those. Might as well take care of the rest of them and just build on that color as I'm attacking the rest of the shoulder. Might as well get that center icon too while I'm at it. Okay. All right. Might as well get all the edges while we're here, because the dullest edge on this shoulder icon is going to be the golden yellow. Everything else is going to be brighter than that in terms of edges. Okay. So now I've got golden yellow everywhere that I want it here, primarily here, here, and here. I'm going to move into soul yellow and just build it up right in the middle. That's giving me that yellow finish that I want. The golden yellows, it would be a good finish, but it's too creamy of a finish for me for what I'm going for right now. I'm actually going for that brilliant yellow. Okay, get some of that on that center icon. Can have a little more fun with where it's placed on this. Transition those highlights. There we go. All right, so now that I got those done, go ahead and quickly do the highlights here on the shoulder pad, on the trim. Then I can do the white real quick on it. Okay. Yeah, coming along pretty good. Now, these rivets that I'm doing in Soul Yellow, a couple of them will have to be brought up as well. But not until I get the white going very soon. It's actually the next step. Okay. And this white, just like last time, where that soul yellow is, just gonna do some very light streaking. It's gonna brighten it up. Just one more little bit of building contrast. And then on all the most extreme edges, we're going to get just a little bit of white. And just a touch of white on a couple of these rivets. The sun is really shining off this armor. Center sigil, just some select points are going to get some dead white. So it just occurred to me to mention it, but I am painting Haarken without his backpack. That is just for ease of access to the rest of the model. Okay. Now we've got his other shoulder done. Okay. Got two shoulders done. A nice bright yellow non-metallic metal. Move on. So we'll try to fly through his gauntlets here, or his claws. So there are lots of black base coats on this guy. The reason being is that it's just a good starting point for a lot of the colors that I'm going to be doing. Moving forward, the plan with him is to have a blue non-metallic metal for the spear tip and the butt end of it, his knuckles, all of the cabling on the abdomen, some various other pieces. Should look good. It's going to be a very high contrast model. So it's important to remember that when you're doing any sort of non-metallic metal work, when you're going at even this glove here, for example, there's several different pieces that are not one continuous piece. Even though they're part of the same gauntlet, you have to treat each individual section as its own unique piece for catching and influencing the light. Because whenever you have light shining on something, as soon as it hits a hard edge, I guess a hard reflective edge or anything, it's going to influence it. It's going to change the way that the light is falling over the object. you know, if you have a you know, a shiny metal ball and light is hitting it, it's going to reflect off it and it's going to follow the contour of the ball in a very specific way. But then as soon as you put a dent in the ball or you put a crack, the light that's shining on the ball is going to react totally differently. And you're going to get a whole new pattern falling over the contour of the ball. Here, just going back through with gold and yellow, same as we did for the shoulders. We are going to need to catch some of these edges. There will be more contrast building as well once I'm done some of the yellow here on the upper body. We're going to be bringing a bunch of stuff down too. So right now we're essentially working in one direction, like the band. Gotta always be keen about keeping your brush wet. You know, if you're not washing it off between every dip, which is a little excessive, then at least every few, you know. Just a good idea. Spend a bunch of money on nice paint brushes and then don't take care of it. It's a shame. Okay. I am a chronic brush licker as well. I'm always reshaping the tip. Okay, so gold and yellow is done. Pretty sure anyway. So now I'm just going to be moving into the soul yellow and the more brilliant, less creamy yellow. Doing these yellows, it's kind of funny. I remember when I first started commission painting years ago. I did one piece and I was pretty proud of it, you know, and it was just a couple of Space Marines that I did to, you know, what I had considered a high standard at that point in time, and it was one of the first gradient power weapons that I had ever done with wet blending, and technically speaking, came out all right. The technique was there, the blending was done well, from what I remember anyway. However, it was in this bright yellow that just totally stood out like crazy against the Space Marine captain that I had done it with. Now that it got a couple laughs, and somebody laughed, and you know, they were asking me why on earth a client would want a canary yellow power sword. And of course, you know, being a new commission painter, you know, I felt a little defensive about it, but you know, I could admit for sure, definitely a little ridiculous. He had been wanting a golden power sword, and yeah, that was a do-over. But now I'm using similar yellows with purpose and a little more skill in color placement and a little more contrast than just bright yellow on bright yellow. Okay, just a little bit more of this solid yellow. Okay, dead white. Just some of those light streaks in the bright areas, right? Get a couple of, Jesus, doing the same thing I did last time. Starting to pull it out of camera. All right. Okay. All right. Get a couple of those rivets on the knuckles. And all right, there you go. That claw done. Ready to move on. Just gonna do the wristlet on this side. Give me 1 sec. I just gotta wet my mouth. All right. Okay. Excuse me. Back to the other side. Keep jumping across the model here. Okay. This one should be relatively quick. Just wet blend in some of that golden yellow. You know what? While it's still a little wet, just going to take some sol yellow here. Just drop it right in the middle. Just a quick color blend. Perfect. If you can catch two paints while they're wet and blend them together, excellent. It's a two brush blending technique with one brush. One brush blending. I'm going to take this golden yellow just all the way along the edge. Give it a nice defined light edge. Right. Okay, I'm going to go back to the sol yellow. Just a quick touch right in the middle of where I just blended them. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a little more of an edge. Just that gradient edge that I've been harping on. Okay. Move on to the white. A couple of streaks. Nah, mean. Those out a little bit. There are a couple spots on this armor that can catch light better than others. So those rivets on the top are going to get that dead white, and there's a little bit of an outcrop in the right here that's going to get it as well. And I have one bristle on this brush that is sticking out, and I've been doing my best to be diligent and keep reshaping, but I don't want to clip anything. It's too new to clip. Once you give in and you decide you're going to clip something, man, that's the beginning of the end. Okay. I'm going to move on to a little bit of dryad bark. The shoulder pads and wrist stuff that I just did, just because I don't want this video to get too monotonous, you know what I mean? Worst case scenario, we pick back up where we left off next week. Now, the thing with that is that I know what paints I'm using. I have a set process for how I'm applying them. So there's nothing stopping me from putting this down and coming back to it, in 10 days. Whereas if I was just winging it, then it would be a little harder. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that my dryad bark is very dilute, because I don't want to mess with everything too much. But what I am going to do is just some of those areas, I'm just going to darken them up just a bit, because it's going to help me build higher contrast. So basically I'm pretty much doing like a brown glaze technique in here. And if I happen to get a little bit too much pigment, like I get a pool of pigment, I wet my brush, excuse me, and I drag it out. Okay. Dryad bark is a great color. Use it very frequently. And when you do it in a glaze, it's just not as offensive if you happen to screw something up. Which I'm not saying I just did, but I'm saying in general, if you screw up when you're glazing, it is more forgiving. Just remember that. Okay, that's that shoulder. Essentially, I focused on a couple spots. Here was a big one. There. And then the natural shadows. So those two spots that I did up near the front, basically what it is it creating a sharp contrast, light, dark, light, right? So it's creating a pattern in that light as the light is falling on different sections of the shoulder pad in different ways. Do the same thing up here on the opposite shoulder. And just to break things up, there's a little spike up here on the shoulder pad that juts out. And just to break up the color, I am going to give that spike right at the base some of that dryad bark, even though it is directly butted up against the brightest highlight that we have. That's going to create a very nice contrast. And just like Gabriel Angelos, very excited to see the completion of this project and get him out for the camera. Which I did just post a picture of Gabriel today. Turned out exceptional. Now the picture that I posted is a tad glossy. Okay. Yeah, sorry. The picture was a tad glossy just because there was a protective varnish that was on it still. So that'll set over the course of a few days. There's a little notch in the center of this chaos icon here. Just going to rim that notch in brown. Okay. I'm just getting some of these lower arrows in brown. I guess I can go ahead and do this side too. There we go. Okay. We're moving across this gauntlet here. Again, paying close attention to where I'm putting the brown so that I can best create a pattern that looks natural. Creating that pattern of light, dark, light is very nice. Doesn't always work, but you know, if you find that you just don't have enough transitions, you know, you can always go back and add more. Okay. Just 1 sec. It becomes a whole family affair when you post about a live stream on Instagram and your mother texts you halfway through to tell you about a spelling mistake. Thanks, Mom. All right, back to it. So there wasn't a whole big need for the brown on this claw here. You know, the color transition was done pretty well to begin with. We have a couple spots, you know, that we can hone in on just for effect. on the opposite side, have that wristlet. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going up with the brown right between the edge highlight on the top and the bottom of this wrist trim, just basically creating a little triangle. So starting thick in the back and moving forward to a thinner tip, just creating a more natural transition on that highlight. Same thing on the other side, but on a much smaller scale, because the front here is catching quite a bit of light because he is raising, you know, his spear arm. He's gonna be throwing it. So there, looks pretty good. Next, black. Dark colors are essential when you are doing non-metallic metals, especially blacks. Just a bit of a dulled down black right in the center of that brown. Just gonna thin it and scrub it. So again, glaze-like consistency, right? Right down in the most shallow areas. Nothing extreme. Just sort of building off the brown that you laid out. There we go. There are places that black just does not work, but maybe on the underside of these rivets, I'll give them just a touch. Just a touch. Okay. Then on the inside lip of this trim, just going to give it a bit. Not super thin, but what I'm doing here is I'm cleaning it up. Just want to clean up the transition between the yellows and the red. You know, I don't want any of that yellow color to have spilled directly onto the red armor. There we go. So, a couple of details on this eye too. In the center here, there is some heavily recessed areas in there that I am just going to do totally blacked out, because it is not reasonable to assume that light would make its way in there. Get on here, inside lip, especially underneath. Gonna catch some black. Help build that contrast. That severe light to dark effect. Now, sometimes doing stuff like this does take a certain degree of brush control. No matter how much brush control you have, you still need to be patient, and you still do mess up from time to time. Man, I keep touching my camera with my brush. I'm gonna have to play with different setups. Thought I found a winning one this week, because I do rather like this. Okay, that's one shoulder. I might as well move on down to the claw down here. Get some of that. Now, I'm not 100% sure on how these edges are going to react once I start to fill in the skulls. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm hoping that that is just going to build off the contrast that I've created already. All right. Okay. Next up, opposite shoulder. Let's do the same thing. Create a nice line in that deep pit. You know, if you ever look at your model when you're painting it, and you think to yourself, man, what do I need? What's next? Like, how am I going to make this better? Just go with contrast. Build more contrast. I've got Old Town Road stuck in my head right now, but I don't know the lyrics. You know, even though I have this thing on a hobby holder, I am manhandling this thing. There's so many points on this model too, so many sharp, hard edges that guaranteed, you know, this is not gonna hold up. I'm gonna have to do lots of touch-ups coming back to it. I mean, it's not a bad thing, not by any means, but there's more work. I work better and steadier if I can actually hold the model. Okay, there we go. So the shoulders and arms of Haarken are done. That is as far as I'm going with the non-metallic metals on them. For now, anyway. Who knows? When I'm progressing more through the model and I'm coming up on the end of it, I very well might, come back and do some more stuff. For the time being, right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the center chest and the butt flap on the back. Now, I do have his backpack sitting across the room, but I haven't quite decided yet what I'm going to do with his backpack. If I'm going to do it in red, the same as I'm doing with his counterparts, or if I am going to maybe approach this as a conversion opportunity. Hang on a sec. What do we got here? All right. Maybe some of these bad boys on Haarken. That could be cool. I don't know. You have to play with him a little bit. Maybe different wing pattern. He's a pretty cool model. Good opportunities, but yeah. If we want to do like Worldclaimer, Angel of Death, it could be neat. What do you think? Let me know. Stock backpack or dope wings. Right, moving on. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. So I'm going to go with the gold and yellow. Right into those highlighted areas. Right. A few spots that I've identified. Now some of the non-metallic metals on this thing, it's a little, I'm doing things a little more thoroughly than I would on batch painted stuff, obviously. This being a very cool single character that does need to stand out, in both appearance and quality. But also, we're doing it on a live stream, and it is non-metallic metals, which are time consuming. It is a high effort endeavor. Now, if you ever do want to challenge your painting abilities, go take a swing at some non-metallic metals. Do them from time to time. Again, there's not a huge demand of my clients on my end anyway. I don't know about the other pros out there, but I cater mainly to gamers as opposed to collectors, and the wargaming community wants something that looks really good. they're not too hung up on non-metallic metal versus true metallics, and truth be told, true metallics are a lot quicker, and they still do yield a very nice result. In fact, I would argue that for a whole army, true metallics, something that you're going to play with and actually use. Go with the true metallics just for longevity of the painting and, you know, ease of application and uniformity in the style. You know, a little harder to uniformly paint 300 models in non-metallic metal than it is true metallics, you know. Save the non-metallic metals for your characters or your collectible pieces, stuff like that. You know, like I said, you can tell me to shove it, that's fine, but that's just my take on it. All right. Going around his belt quickly. His belt is not going to be catching a whole lot of light, but there is a little spot that I want to be highlighted. Not a big one, a little one, but it also does mean that we're going to have to go around the edges in that golden yellow and then follow it up with the soul yellow. Get to the back. A couple spots that have a highlight mapped out here towards the right hand side. I love my style of painting for that. Takes a lot of the guesswork out of where I'm going to be placing certain things. It's all in the setup. Catch these edges, golden yellow. Catch these inside edges too, just for posterity. Okay, jump into some of that soul yellow. Goes quick. Soul yellow is just a very minute area. Follow out those edge highlights. Soul yellow. Stagger it. Okay, keep some directionality to these highlights. Remember, light is coming from one direction. Okay. So I'll grab this soul yellow here on the front chest too. Almost forgot about that. Okay. Okay. Let's catch a couple highlights. And then the belt, just a wee bit. The line is a little chunky. There we go. Thin it out a bit. Okay, just gonna go ahead and jump to the back here. Do that dead white, a couple streaks through that solid yellow. Again, not solid, just some streaks. All I'm trying to do is break up that highlight. Get those rivets. Couple them in white. Get the corners in white. Right? Right. Get this corner down here. Just a touch. Those last two rivets sitting in the darkest spot are going to be solid yellow. Okay. That's pretty good looking back plate there. Okay, white here, we have one arrow that is very bright. Very, very bright. Intentionally. Okay, I'm streaking through it on an angle, catching a couple of those raised edges and then one of the downward edges in white. Another piece of trim here, bottom. Okay. Even in the areas that are not catching much light. So I intentionally went with a very dark underside to the claw here and very dark in the armpit close to it. I needed to have one area at least that was very dark in this model, and that was it. But that means that it's hard to get light in there. But there are still hard edges and places that light would be creeping into. So down here we do have a few rivets and one of the edges hit with the brightest white. And that way we're showing that it's still a reflective surface even though it is hidden in shadow. So we have a belt, just one quick little streak because it's a very thin line. And just a little touch on the top. Okay. So that is his entire upper half non-metallic metal gold. Okay, we're going to start working on the lower half here. Just have a sip of my beer. All right. Okay. So golden yellow right here on the leg pad. Just gonna feather that in, wet my brush, and then blend in the very edge. Okay. I might as well go down the leg here. Get the whole thing. All right. Again, already road mapped. It's perfect. It's good for my painting style. My highlights are already preset for me essentially. Okay. It's going to be an interesting shin pad. It's kind of going to be a metallic gold blending into red, into the red armor. Should be cool once it's done, once we get the red done. All that red work will probably be one of the last things that I work on in this. It's just going to be like a tying the whole model together at the end sort of deal. Yeah, I can already see the tip of this little bone outcrop here is blackened, so it has suffered the wear and tear of my hand holding the model instead of the holder. We just going to do the lower trim on this leg here. Okay, you guys are going to have to give me a couple minutes. Hang on. Okay, so we're back, or I'm back. Essentially, that is a hazard of having a couple of young kids in the house. Sometimes there are too many kids and not enough hands. So when two of them wake up, then many hands makes light work, right? Okay, so back to what I was doing. Going ahead, getting all this yellow transitioned properly on the lower leg here. So we're going back to the golden yellow. Get to pick and choose where it's reflecting, which is nice. Create some nice patterns, some nice light patterns on here. Okay. Clean it all up. Get the edges. Just like we did with the shoulder pads. At the end, we'll come back and we'll bring everything down with the browns and the blacks. Create a little bit more of a deeper contrast in here. So we're going to go back and we're going to do the same thing in the chest piece and the belt and the back there also. For now, I want to focus on getting the yellow portions of these the metallics done. Because, you know, this stuff is pretty fun. But it does need to get done. So you can see how long I'm spending on this here, right? Doing this, you know, that other squad of 10 is a daunting task. You know, you have to do it one at a time. So it is very time consuming. But that being said, there are people who do it for entire armies, and the amount of man hours that it takes to do that is ridiculous. You know, if somebody wanted to hire me to do an entire army in you know, a well done non-metallic metal, you know, I would do it. I would absolutely do it. But I think it would be not only exorbitantly expensive, very, well, I guess prohibitively expensive, but I'd probably never touch a brush again. Okay. All right. Might as well get his foot while I'm at it. Did do the trim on the feet. Alright, get that foot trim. Alright, now we're rocking. Okay, we're in the front of that foot a little bit. I haven't quite decided what I want to do with the marine on the base here. If I want to do it as a just a very bloodied up, rusted out blood angel, that might be cool. Okay, do some more of this golden yellow. Catch some of those hard edges. Yeah, baby. I think she's looking pretty good. So those rivets, I can build off them as I need to. Okay. And now retouch up a little bit on the lower pad here. There's a bit of a line that I want to catch, just to separate those lower teeth from the trim on the front. Just down there. I think that's going to be a cool face once everything's done, touched up, and I've actually brought the contrast out a little more with some browns and blacks. Still need to go up in the yellow and then the whites, but we'll start up here, work our way down. Okay. See, catch that. Shit. There we go. Okay. So, fixing mistake. I was going to do a little bit of soul yellow here on the top rim. Brush slipped, and I dragged a streak of paint down into this shaded underside. Stuck out like a sore thumb. So, if you make a mistake, make your correction as soon as you make the mistake. My favorite method of fixing a mistake is, while it's still wet before it's dried, is quickly rinse and soak your brush, and then just go back and with a really wet brush just scrub it right out. Should wipe away pretty quick if you got it in time. Just gonna get the teeth here. once I'm done for the evening, before I put my end screen up, I'll zoom in and I'll focus the camera on select pieces of this model. Show y'all what's up with it. Gotta remember not to drag this model off camera. It's so hard. I have a tendency to pull it closer to my body, but I don't like to sit that close to the table. All about that good posture. It's true. Good posture is essential for for any sort of longevity in painting as a hobby or a profession. The last thing you want is to be fighting with neck and shoulder pain because you're not practicing good posture. Back pain, hips, you name it. So try to sit straight backed as much as you can. Don't mean to harp on anybody. Give you a very mom-esque lesson. So just working through this sol yellow here on the one leg. Okay. Just going to get that foot. That sol yellow is just sort of going to cascade down the side, down the edges, just a little bit, not a lot. It is, however, also there is a notch in the foot pad here. It's going to catch in that. Like that. Okay. Rinse my brush. Get some of this nice white going. Streak quickly through that sol yellow a couple times. Very light, very gentle streaks, okay? Just breaking it up a bit. Nothing crazy. Now we can start to collect some white points. Some of those just select areas where you're going to catch just a little bit of brilliant white light from the sun. Okay. In the very bottom corner of that. And do this edge highlight transition to white. Move over to the back. See, the white does dry pretty pasty on the brush, so make sure you're diligent in washing it and getting the actual paint out of there. Looking forward to getting into the blue, not metallic metals on this thing, too, the blue silvers. I did them before on a some dark Eldar stuff. Looked really cool. Lots of blacks, you know, coming into like a sky blue with very brilliant white highlights in it. I was pretty pleased. I think it was going to mesh very well with the style of this thing here. Okay. Ooh, Dr. Zach. Make fun of me all you want, guys. I was that painter sitting down here for, you know, 8 hours and then getting up and going to bed and waking up and not being able to lift my head. So streaks on the back of the ankle there, or the back of the heel. And just a bit of white to touch it up. Just a little bit on the front of the foot. By the toe. It's coming along well. Okay, we got one leg left to do. We're gonna go through the leg and then we'll call it after that. Let's see. Okay. All right, golden yellow. It's coming in. It's going to be focused on the inside of the knee here. It's a very good natural way for the light to come in on this model down here, because the light is coming down here, right? Or even down whatever angle you want, but he's opening up his entire side by raising the spear, whereas this side is going to be more closed off and more in shadow. Hence the underside of the claw and the armpit area here. Now, I'll stress it again, if nobody uses a wet palette, get on that. It's a pretty life-changing tool as far as painting goes. You know, it doesn't have to be a super fancy, you know, Kickstarter funded wet palette, or, you know, an expensive, you know, name brand palette or anything like that. You can do a wet palette with some paper towel and a Tupperware container and a bunch of parchment paper. In fact, that's what I did for a long time. The only thing I use right now is my Masters Stay Wet palette. I don't use the paper that they sell for it. Essentially, when you buy one of these palettes here, now it's just a plastic container with a chamois in it and some parchment paper, except they come with their own brand of paper. It's very thick. It's a very thick stock, and it separates the paint, or sorry, the moisture from the paint more so than it should. But it only does that because it's designed for full-bodied acrylic paints, which are not the modeling paints that we typically use. The paints that we use for models is closer to a watercolor paint than anything. So the fix for that is to scrap the paper that Masters gives you and just use parchment paper. That's just the right amount of moisture into the paint. Okay, almost done with the golden yellow here. All I'm going to do at this point is just quickly hit the edges. Then I can go into that solid yellow. Remember, just basically just staggering every highlight. And then once this is all done, once all the yellows are done, we're going to go back and attack everything with the browns and the blacks. Sharpen up that contrast. Good. Okay. So the same thing here with his face on the knee. It's going to be an interesting piece going to basically be going this this gold and melding into that the red. Go. Tell we're kind of on the tail end of my time here. Starting to go a little bit quiet and just chugging away. I think all in all, I'm on track to be able to do everything that I wanted to do. In fact, more than I even expected. I didn't think that that I'd be able to get through all the yellows tonight. You know, at the end of a long day too, it isn't always an easy thing to come pre-schedule, you know, a couple hours of painting, you know, in front of a camera, having to try to explain everything that I'm doing for the sake of the viewer. So I certainly sympathize with people who, you know, come home from a long day at work and yeah, you know, your brain is pretty fried, and sure, you know, you'd love to just sit down and paint, but can't find the motivation. Been there. But then also, on the flip side, kudos to everybody that does it, and then jumps on and, you know, does Twitch streaming or what have you. You know, we're making videos, YouTube videos, Instagram content, Facebook content, moderating groups. You know, anybody who contributes to the hobby, good on you. Okay, so we're moving into the solid yellow. Things should move a little more quickly here because everything is staggered. Okay, so that was it for the solid yellow, except for the couple quick edges. Just the ones that I want to brighten up just a touch. Solid yellow doesn't bring out much of a highlight against the golden yellow, but what it does do is it changes that hue a little bit. Just makes it a little brighter because that gold yellow is just, it's a little chalky for what I'm trying to accomplish right now. A little too muted. I'm actually aiming for this to be a more brilliant, bright yellow gold, as opposed to like a tarnished brown gold. This be a gold so bright that it basically flies in defiance of the Emperor. Okay. It's good. Weights. Streak it. All right. Some directional light streaks. Get the rivets. Because why not? Again, I'll catch some light. Definitely gonna have to do the white rivets on this side. There's no choice. There's nowhere to go in terms of bringing the color up. A couple little glints here. Those points. White is starting to bind up on the brush. So close you can almost taste it. Okay. And I think this is going to do it. Actually, one little touch up. Yeah. So that's going to do it for today. Like I've said, we still have the browns and the blacks to do on this thing. But for now, what we're going to do is I will, let's see, crank the exposure down a little bit, see if that helps. Let's see. Might have to bring the exposure up, back up. There we go. That is more, a little better. Okay, so what we've gone ahead and done here is we've gone from just from sort of a rough transitional yellow, so black to yellow basically. We have transformed this into the non-metallic metal trim for Haarken Worldclaimer. This is an alternate color scheme. Normally he's black armor on the box art. But what we're doing here, again, red armor, non-metallic metal gold. You can see the shoulders, you can see the dark to light, dark, light, dark, light, then back to dark, following the trim where shadows would normally be. Same thing on the glove here. You know, got the dark underside. Light is hitting the top and pooling away. Got some nice transitions, making use of the whites. Sparingly making use of the white. This shoulder emblem here is definitely going to take a little bit more work. It's very narrow, very thin, so that is going to be a challenge to work with and make look good. The actual trim on the shoulder piece came out very nicely. Same thing with the trim on the glove over here. And then working our way down, you know, we got chest piece. This back plate came out very well. Same thing with the backs of the legs here. If you can see the trim there, lots of nice light color transitions. Got good lighting pattern in there. I'm very happy with how this non-metallic metal is turning out so far. And this face here, this will come out very nicely, I think. Anyway, so that's it for today. Next week we can expect to quickly go through and touch up the trim with Dryad Bark and Game Color Black. Again, that's just to keep building contrast for what we've already laid out. And then from there, we can go ahead next week. Once that's done, we'll probably start doing the detail pieces. And then I think we're going to finish up with the blue non-metallic metals at the very, very end. Right, it is 10:31 by my clock here. So thank you guys very much. And have a great evening. Not next week, but the week after. I'll see you for a new stream.